James is home. But his secret puts Diep in danger status when Diep believed the nightmare had finally loosened its grip, just when James, battered and limping, had crossed the threshold of their wooden house and into her waiting arms. Something darker, older, and far more patient slipped quietly back into their world. The night before had been almost gentle. For the first time in days, the wind didn't howl through the bamboo grove behind their home. The lamplight was soft, flickering gold onto the wooden walls. The porridge simmering on the stove smelled of ginger and comfort. James had slept with the uneasy breathing of a man returning from the edge of something unspeakable. And that alone had felt like a small miracle. But he slept. Diep had sat beside him until her eyelids grew heavy. She watched his chest rise and fall, watched the tension drain from his brow, watched the fragile peace settle into the room and thought, finally it's over. But peace is rarely what it seems in places where the forest remembers too much. And by morning, the shadow that had been circling their lives for far longer than either of them realized, finally stepped forward. At dawn, the bamboo grove was usually alive in the softest ways, birds hopping between slender branches. Sunlight broken into coins of gold on the ground. The smell of wet earth carried by the early wind. It was a place of morning rituals, Diep stretching her shoulders, Dawn trotting across the yard with a wagging tail, James limping to the porch with a cup of warm water if he wasn't too sore. But today, the world exhaled differently. Today, the grove felt aware. Diep stopped mid-step, her feet bare on the cool wooden planks of the porch. Something, an instinct told as bone, caught her breath halfway in her chest. A stillness pressed against her skin, the kind that didn't belong in the freshness of dawn. Dawn felt it first. The gentle dog who never barked at neighbors, who curled at Diep's feet every evening, stood rigid. His fur bristled along his spine, tail stiff, ears sharpened into perfect points. His body vibrated with a warning that came from someplace primal. He stared, unblinking, at the bamboo grove. "Dawn," Diep whispered, almost afraid to disturb the air. "What is it, boy?" He didn't growl. But he didn't move, either. Not yet. Inside the house, James stirred. The sound of Dawn's low rumble reached him through the thin walls. He tried to sit up, but the pain in his leg shot upward with a sharp, electric sting. "Diep," he called, breath tight. "What's happening?" She didn't answer. Because at that moment, the leaves rustled, not the playful chatter of morning wind, but a slow, deliberate shift. Like something brushing past. Something moving with intention. Diep's eyes narrowed. She scanned the shadows between the bamboo stalks. 1,000 shapes lived there naturally, but this one, this suggestion of a figure, did not belong. And yet her heartbeat felt wrong. Nothing moved. The silence deepened, heavy as a held breath. Finally, Diep stepped back, one slow foot at a time, until she stood beneath the safety of the porch roof. "It's nothing," she called into the house, too quickly, too softly. Probably just an animal. But her heart hammered violent warnings against her ribs. James had lived beside her long enough to understand the truth hidden between her pauses. He knew the way Diep bit the inside of her cheek when fear pulled at her insides. He knew how her hands trembled just slightly when she tried to sound calm. And he knew her voice too well to mistake it now. "Diep," he said quietly from the bed. "Tell me." She finally turned to him. Worry knotted her brows in ways she didn't bother hiding. "There was someone," she admitted. not an animal. Dawn only reacts like that when it's a person. James's jaw tightened. Inside the grove? The thought felt like ice sliding beneath his skin. Diep nodded once, small, stiff, terrified. James swallowed hard. If someone had followed him. If someone had tracked him through the forest. Past the border, past the storm, that means, he whispered. I know, Diep said. It means someone might have followed you home. The words tasted bitter. James shifted, wincing as pain stabbed at his ankle. Like metal on her tongue? Can you help me sit? No, she snapped instinctively. The medic told you to rest. I can't rest, he murmured, eyes locked on the grove. Not if someone is out there. After a long hesitation. Diep moved to his side, propping him up with pillows. Sliding an arm behind his shoulders. James sucked in a breath and fought the ache. Better, he lied. Better? She whispered. But the room felt smaller now, too small for the dread pressing against its walls. James's gaze darted to the windows, the thin wooden slats. The frail door. Too exposed. Too open. Diep watched him silently, realizing the same thing in the same moment. They were not prepared for this. There's more. Diep, James said softly. I think I need to tell you the rest. Her heartbeat rose like a wave. The rest of what? James looked down at his hands, scraped. Bruised, still trembling from the journey. I didn't want to talk about it yesterday, he said. I was too tired. And too afraid of making it sound worse than it was. But you deserve to know. Diep sat beside him. I'm listening. He took a breath long enough to steady himself. The night I helped that boy escape, he began, I thought it ended there. I thought the worst thing that would happen was this. He gestured toward his broken leg. Diep's breath trembled, remembering every hour she spent waiting. Terrified he wouldn't come back at all. But after I left the farmer's house, James continued. After I heard the footsteps behind me in the forest, I realized something. Diep leaned closer. Realized what? James lifted his eyes, voice barely a whisper. The men weren't chasing me. Diep froze. What? What do you mean? They weren't calling my name, James said. They weren't looking for me. A cold weight settled in Diep's stomach. They were looking for a woman, he said. And when they said her name, he hesitated. It wasn't my name. But it sounded like yours. The blood drained from Diep's face. You think they were looking for me? She whispered. He didn't need to. James didn't answer. Silence itself became the confirmation neither of them wanted. Diep flinched. A soft thud echoed outside. James jerked upright despite the pain. It came from the back, he said. Diep rushed to the window, pressing her eye to the slats. Nothing moved in the yard, yet something had been there, she felt it. The bamboo stalks still swayed, but not in any rhythm the wind would make. Someone slipping through just seconds earlier. It was a human disturbance. What if, she whispered, barely audible. Her throat tightened. What if they knew where I lived? James inhaled sharply. I should have told you sooner, he said. I should have told you everything the moment I walked in the door. No. You came home half broken. Diep said fiercely. You barely made it alive. There's no blame here. James stared at her, at the strength in her eyes even as fear twisted the air around them. Her hand covered her belly protectively, a small, instinctive gesture that made his heart clench. She stood between him and the door without thinking. as if she could shield him from the world. "Why you?" he whispered. "Why were they looking for you?" Diep lowered her gaze. "I don't know," she said. "But I don't think this started when you were gone." James's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Then, the stranger who came to the village." The words were a tremor. "The one who asked about a woman." James went still. "What did he ask?" he said slowly. "He didn't know my name," she replied. "My height. But he described me. My hair. Even the color of the shirt I wore that day." James's breath caught. "That wasn't random," he muttered. "That wasn't rumor." "No," Diep said quietly. "It wasn't." They stared at each other, two people who had survived storms, separation, near loss, realizing the real danger had only just begun. Don let out a low growl. The bamboo rustled again. "This isn't over, is it?" James's jaw tightened. "James," Diep whispered. "It's just beginning." The air shifted. "No," he said. Don didn't bark, didn't growl, he simply stared. Every muscle locked, as if he recognized the presence lurking beyond the shadows. Inside, James pushed himself upright, pain tearing through his leg. But Diep couldn't answer. "Diep," he called. Not when something was watching them from the trees. Not when the past she thought she had buried was walking slowly, deliberately, toward their present. Because this time, the danger wasn't coming from across the border. This time, it wasn't tied to James's journey. Her past. It was here for her. Her unfinished story. Her forgotten name. Something slipped out of sight. The bamboo swayed. And the warning left at their doorstep, yet to be discovered, would reveal the first piece of a truth dangerous enough to destroy everything James had fought to save.